But let's start things off today with the college football coaching carousel. It was an eventful weekend of college football, to say the least. This year's coaching carousel feels much more eventful than years past. There's a lot of high level programs that needed new coaches and got them. But Braden, we have to start with the most notable of the bunch. Lane Kiffin going to LSU on a 7-year, $91 million deal and postseason bonuses this year if Ole Miss has success in the college football playoff. This was, the one that we knew was going to be the biggest of the offseason, and it is official. He's going to LSU. Braden, what do you make of this?
Yeah, Lane Kiffin was the most coveted coach on the market, and for good reason. He's led Ole Miss to its two most successful seasons in school history, and yes, I am valuing two 11-win seasons in today's era over a shared 1960 national championship. In his 14 seasons as a head coach at the NFL level, Kiffin is 117 and 53. He's got a 10-win season at three different schools, has two appearances in New Year's Six bowl games. If he was sticking at Ole Miss, he would also have a playoff appearance on his resume, which I think he technically won't after going over to LSU. At Ole Miss, Kiffin was 10 and 10 against ranked opponents. Against ranked opponents all time, Ole Miss is 97 games below 500, and since 2010, coaches not named Lane Kiffin are 13 and 34 against ranked opponents. Recruiting wise, Kiffin's also pulled in the top 30 class each of the last four seasons, three top 25 classes, at a school that is pretty difficult to recruit at compared to the rest of the SEC. But Lane Kiffin does not come without baggage. He said that he finally found himself in Oxford and then proceeded to prove he's the exact same Lane Kiffin he was when he left Tennessee over a decade ago. Of Lane Kiffin's five previous head coaching stops, he has been drama free at exactly one of them, which was Florida Atlantic. With the Raiders as an NFL head coach, had a public spat with Al Davis, the owner at the time, prior to being fired. The Raiders were able to fire him with cause as well. And for Tennessee, he left basically in the middle of the night after one season. At USC, the Trojans left him on the tarmac and didn't let him board the team plane after firing him. And now this during his departure from Ole Miss. Additionally, while he was Alabama's offensive coordinator, he also sparred a little bit with Nick Saban, although it does seem like those two are a little bit close now, with Kiffin saying he reached out to Saban as a mentor. So I'm going to give this hire a B plus for LSU. Kiffin was clearly the best head coaching candidate available, at least from a resume standpoint. The only one on the market who would be an upgrade over Brian Kelly. However, he comes with a lot of baggage and a hefty price tag. Additionally, the Louisiana state government loves to meddle with this program. The school has also embezzled money from a children's hospital, and pretty much every coach since Nick Saban, besides Ed Orgeron, has had some type of shenanigans going on while at LSU. So I'm giving this hire a B plus for right now. It's either going to be an A plus or an F by the time Lane Kiffin's first contract is up in 2032. There is absolutely no in between.
And yeah, I think that last part is perfect. You knew it wasn't going to be pretty leaving Oxford, and it was not. But some credit has to go to Ole Miss. I mean, they didn't play Lane's game. He made it clear that he was leaving, and they said, "All right, that's fine. You can get the hell out of town," and didn't let him finish the season. And so I think Ole Miss, as a university, handled it as well as they could have. As for LSU, I think I would say right now it's probably in that A minus to B plus range, like you said. But for the time being, I mean, I think this is a slam dunk. You can win a national title with Lane Kiffin. He's going to recruit well. He's a great coach. He's bringing several members of his offensive staff including offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss, who, despite signing a 3-year contract with LSU, is being allowed to go back and coach in the college football playoff. So that's something I found a little bit odd. But I think if LSU had Lane Kiffin this year, they're probably a playoff contender. They were my preseason SEC champion. The offense just did not pan out. Lane is a genius offensive mind. He's got the number 2 overall recruit in the country committed to him in Lamar Brown, who, from the sounds of it, could be a 5-star offensive lineman or a 5-star defensive lineman, whichever way they want to play him. But yeah, like I said, I think this is a slam dunk for LSU. A tough time for Ole Miss for sure, as they get ready for a playoff run without their coach. But as far as LSU goes, I mean, you got the premier guy. I don't know how you can't not be happy about it. So yeah, I'm with you. I would say in that A minus to B plus range for LSU. Up next, a guy who was let go pretty early into the season, despite having some success at his former school. That is James Franklin, who was hired by Virginia Tech, signed a 5-year, $41.75 million deal with the Hokies. Braden, what do you got here?
I love this for the Hokies. James Franklin is a very solid recruiter, consistently brought in top 15 classes at Penn State. In 2018 and 2022, had the number 6 overall class in both years. And we've seen that already at Virginia Tech. The Hokies have already flipped 7 4-star commits from Penn State since he took over as head coach. I think it was, 3 weeks ago or somewhere in that range. On the field as well, James Franklin is a very solid coach. Went 24-15 at Vanderbilt. He went 9-4 and won a bowl game in both years 2 and 3 while he was there. And up until Clark Lee, he might have been the most successful Vanderbilt coach of all time, even in that small sample size. Prior to his arrival in Nashville, Vanderbilt had never won 9 games in the season and had won 8 games only once since 1955. Franklin then went 104-45 at Penn State. He made 5 New Year's Six bowl games, going 3-2 in those games. And then last year, not even 12 months ago, was in the semifinals of the college football playoff. And obviously, James Franklin does have some flaws. Until Penn State inexplicably lost to UCLA and to Northwestern this season, he was the GOAT at winning games he should win and losing games he should lose. He was 4-21 against top 10 opponents and 1-14 against top 5 opponents as the coach of Penn State, including plenty of games where the Nittany Lions were favored. However, I'm going to give this hire an A+ for Virginia Tech. The bar at Virginia Tech is significantly lower than it is at Penn State. As my good friend Ryan Lenahan, a Hokie alumni, said, he'll get us to the big games, but we won't win them. That's good enough for me.
Yeah, and I mean that'd be a step up over where Virginia Tech has been. You mentioned Franklin being a great recruiter. We're already seeing 4-stars, multiple 4-stars, flipping from Penn State to VT, and I think they've got a real chance to kind of run the ACC for several years to come. This is a conference that has a 5-loss team competing in the conference championship game this weekend. James Franklin is a player's coach. He has said that very publicly several times. He will be able to get good players via recruiting, which we've already seen, like I said, and in the portal coming up. I think it was incredibly smart by Virginia Tech to jump on this as soon as possible. We were hearing rumors in like October that there was mutual interest from both parties. He was 104-45 total at Penn State. Obviously, with the games against ranked teams, it's a little bit lower. But I think he'll have a win percentage at Virginia Tech that probably is greater than what it was at Penn State when it's all said and done. So I'm with you. I'm going to say this is an A minus hire. This is probably my second favorite hire of the coaching carousel. But yeah, Virginia Tech should be thrilled to get James Franklin on board. And then Braden, your Florida Gators went out and hired Jon Sumrall, hired him away from Tulane, a projected playoff team where things stand right now. Got him on a 6-year, $44.7 million deal. And Braden, I'm going to let you take it away.
Yeah, Summerall's had success in every year he's been a college football head coach, or at least at the FBS level. He's played for the conference championship game all 4 seasons at the FBS level, both years at Troy, and now both years at Tulane, going a total of 42-11 overall and 28-4 in conference play. He's got some ties to the South and to the SEC. He was a linebacker at the University of Kentucky, so good connection there to have. But there are a little bit of concerns with Jon Sumrall, and they're kind of the same ones that Billy Napier had as Florida's head coach, albeit I think to a lesser degree. I don't think he's Billy Napier 2.0, but it is worth noting for sure. Sumrall's beat up on Group of 5 competition for the most part. He did notch wins over Northwestern and Duke this year, and played Kansas State close in 2024. So there is something to say about him being able to compete at the Power 4 level. But there's also the question of how much of his success at Tulane is due to what Jon Sumrall has done, and how much was because of the position Willie Fritz left the program in. Before Sumrall went to Tulane, the Green Wave were coming off a couple of great seasons under Willie Fritz. They were a combined 23-5, 2 conference title game appearances, 1 conference championship, and a Cotton Bowl win over Caleb Williams and USC in those 2 years preceding Sumrall. Yeah, Sumrall had to navigate a lot of portal departures, but Tulane was a pretty attractive landing spot for players looking to either drop down to the Group of 5 or stick at that level. So I'm going to give this one a C+. My initial grade was a C-. I bumped it up a tad after further consideration. I think I was a little bit too worried about him being Billy Napier 2.0, which I don't think will be the case. Personality-wise, he seems much more driven and much more competitive than Napier. Also is more willing to defer to guys who know more than he does. He's mentioned in his press conference having like an explosive offense, whereas Billy Napier refused to give up offensive coordinator duties, once it was clear it wasn't working, he just continued to stick with it. And that's eventually what ended up getting him canned. Overall, the administration and or the boosters in this case failed miserably in pursuing Lane Kiffin, who completely idolized Steve Spurrier as a young coach. Maybe that turns out to be a blessing in disguise, given how Kiffin has conducted himself recently. But for right now, with a fan base that has had 3 of the last 4 coaches completely flop, and the one good coach consistently sparred with the administration, athletic director Scott Strickland might be on a short leash, especially considering some of his failed hires in other sports as well.
Yeah, I would probably give this like a B. I'm a little bit higher than you are, but I mean, to some extent, that I think that makes sense with you being a Gator fan. This to me, you mentioned, the Billy Napier 2.0 thing. This to me kind of feels like Kalen DeBoer being hired by Washington. DeBoer was great at Fresno State, but the question was, could he do it at a Power 4 level? And of course he could. Jon Sumrall has been great at Troy and Tulane. Can he do it at the Power 4 level? I'm not saying he's going to lead Florida to the national championship in 2 years like DeBoer did at Washington, but he's got Tulane competing for a college football playoff berth less than 12 months after losing your star quarterback in Darian Mensah. You mentioned he was 42-11 in those 4 years at Troy and Tulane. I don't really see a world where he's fired within like 3 years, like I think you could potentially see with some other guys. I'm also not saying he's going to continuously win 10 games every year, but I don't think this is necessarily going to be another Billy Napier ordeal. I think Summerall's better than that. So I'll give it a B, but I can understand some criticism of it. Up next, another SEC program. Alex Golesh goes to the Auburn Tigers. He was hired from USF on a 6-year, $44.4 million contract. Braden, what do you grade this one at?
Golish has done a great job at South Florida. He turned a team that was 4-29 in the 3 years before he arrived to a team that went 23-15 with him at the helm. The offense and defense both improved every season during his tenure with the Bulls. And most importantly to Auburn fans, he's shown that his teams can compete with SEC teams already, in particular Alabama. In 2023 and 2024, the Bulls were within striking distance of Alabama. They were tied at the half in 2023. And then in 2024, they were down just 1 point entering the fourth quarter, and they were within 5 with just under 7 minutes to play. This year, the Bulls go on the road and beat Florida. Additionally, they notched an impressive blowout win over Boise State to kick off the 2025 season. But with Golesh, there are some concerns about sustainability. Once USF started to get things rolling this year, they looked like they were able to sleepwalk their way to the Group of 5 playoff bid, but they stumbled down the stretch this year once they started playing difficult opponents. The wins over Boise State and North Texas were great, but then they lose to Memphis and to Navy on the road in American Conference play. All in all, they went just 2-3 this season against teams that finished with a winning record, although one of those losses was Miami. Really was 2-2 against teams they had a decent shot to beat. Overall, I'm going to give this one a B- for Auburn. Golesh is an exciting hire, but he hasn't been tested too much. I don't think he'll flame out at Auburn, but I also don't expect him to immediately set the world on fire. I expect most seasons with the Tigers to be between 6 and 10 wins for him. And sticking within the SEC for comparison, I'm expecting Golesh to fall somewhere between where Mark Stoops was at Kentucky and where Brent Venables currently is for Oklahoma. Somewhere in that range of kind of maybe a 4 to 6 win floor and probably a 10 to 11 win ceiling, which I think for Auburn, you'd probably take considering the recent coaching hires.
Yeah, I would put this one in the B minus C plus range as well. I think if it were a test, I'd put it at like an 80 out of 100. So yeah, right in that range. But I think on paper, it's a good fit at Auburn. I'm just not sure it's going to pan out. He went 23-15 across 3 years at USF, and just one of those years, being this year, had more than 7 wins. He's a very strong offensive-minded coach. He was the OC at Tennessee in 2021 and 2022, where they were ranked number 1 in the country during that span. The USF offense was among the best in the FBS this year. The defense, though, was an issue at times, allowing just under 400 yards per game. Auburn actually last night lost a 5-star defensive back to Mississippi State in this year's cycle, as in a guy that's going to sign tomorrow on early signing day. So clearly some recruits are not a fan of the hire. I had heard a rumor, I don't know if this is true, that Auburn was fully prepared to offer DJ Durkin, and then their negotiations just completely fell through the roof, kind of middle of the way through last week. So credit to them for still going out and making a good hire here, a respectable hire, I should say. I'm not a huge fan of it at the moment. I certainly could come around and eat my words here in a couple of years after Auburn wins back-to-back 10-win seasons. But right now, I think kind of what you said, the 6 to 10, I would even let's say like 6 to 8, 6 to 9, is probably what I expect. So yeah, somewhere in that B minus C plus range for me, but not a bad hire by any means for the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah, and I'll jump in with one more thing quick on DJ Durkin. It sounds like he is sticking aboard as Auburn's defensive coordinator, so I would tend to think that maybe he was kind of a backup option. I don't know exactly why he would stick around if negotiations fell through to him for him to be the head coach, but it is something kind of interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, great for Auburn to bring him back. Auburn's defense
Mhm.
was fantastic this year. So yeah, they'll certainly take that. Staying in the SEC, Ryan Silverfield signed with the Arkansas, I almost said Hoosiers, the Arkansas Razorbacks. He was hired away from the Memphis Tigers, signed a 5-year, $33.5 million contract. Braden, do you like this one?
I do not. On paper, Memphis was good with Silverfield at the helm. They went 50-24 overall, 27-21 in American Conference play. Silverfield and his Memphis Tigers actually did beat Arkansas earlier this season as well. And Silverfield has already flipped a couple of recruits from within the state of Arkansas. So a little bit of a nice early return there. But overall, I don't like this hire long term. I watched a great breakdown on Silverfield from CF Budge earlier today. Guy makes a ton of college football content on TikTok, YouTube, that kind of stuff. One of his quotes is, "He doesn't have experience with building a program. All Silverfield did was sustain something that was already pretty great at Memphis." And I think that's very accurate. Silverfield went 13-12 between 2021 and 2022, and then Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF all leave the American. They're replaced by Charlotte, Florida Atlantic, North Texas, Rice, UAB, and UTSA from Conference USA, and suddenly things get back on track for the Tigers. Memphis never even played in the American Conference Championship game under Ryan Silverfield. So I'm going to give this hire a D minus. He feels like a complete crash and burn hire for the Hogs. Bobby Petrino pun not intended. There were so many better options out there, and I genuinely don't think that Silverfield is an upgrade over Sam Pittman whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm going to say C minus. This is, another one I'm not super thrilled about. There was a report last Wednesday that came out that Arkansas had landed Alex Golish. That would be a great hire for them, but clearly that did not happen, as we just talked about him going to Auburn. Silverfield was 50-24 in 6 years at Memphis, including 2 10-win seasons. This year, they were 8-4 after being ranked for a little while. This just, to me, feels like another hire for Arkansas that is not going to move the needle. They currently have the 70th ranked recruiting class for 2026 right now. They just finished 2-10, the only SEC team that lost or that did not win a conference game. I think Arkansas kind of needed to find someone that's built a program up, and that is not Ryan Silverfield. He took over for Memphis the year after they went 12-2, and they went 21-15 across the next 3 years after hiring Silverfield. So I don't think this is going to do much for Arkansas, and yeah, I'm going to give that one a C minus D plus, somewhere in that range. Because yeah, I'm with you. I'm not huge on this hire for Arkansas. Up next, Eric Morris, former head coach of North Texas, was hired by Oklahoma State last week. Last I checked, the contract details were not fully released as of the time we're recording this Tuesday night. So that could come out soon, but don't know it at the moment. But Braden, what do you make of this hire?
I really like this hire for the Cowboys. Eric Morris was 11-14 in his first 2 seasons at North Texas prior to this one. However, he also had to navigate North Texas's jump from Conference USA to the American Conference, which is a big step up in competition. In year 3, he is 11-1 and will coach North Texas throughout the rest of the 2025 postseason, including the American Championship game against Tulane this weekend. And then, if they win that game, they're into the college football playoff, almost certainly at that point. At Incarnate Word, before he went to North Texas, he led the Cardinals to the FCS playoffs twice in his 4 seasons there, a place Incarnate Word had never been before he took over. The Mean Green currently have the #1 scoring offense in the nation, putting up just under 47 points per game. Oh yeah, and Eric Morris also laid the groundwork for the development of some guy named Cam Ward's development at Incarnate Word in Washington State. The downside with Eric Morris is his lack of experience. It's just 3 years as an FBS head coach. In two of them, he's below 500. It's possible that this is kind of a one-off situation for him, but overall, I'm going to give this one an A minus. The upside of Eric Morris vastly outweighs the risk of his minimal time as an FBS head coach. North Texas had never even won 10 games in the season in its first 60 years as a program before they won 11 so far this year in just its third year in the best Group 5 conference in the country. And if he can turn a zero-star walk-on into one of the best quarterbacks in the nation and lead a team that was projected to finish 8th in the conference to a conference championship game and possibly a playoff berth, that is convincing enough for me.
Yeah, I mentioned James Franklin being my second favorite hire of the coaching carousel. This is number one for me. I'm giving this an A plus for Oklahoma State. This is an outstanding hire. Year three is when it kind of needs to come together for a head coach. North Texas was 11-14 in Eric Morris's first couple of years. They're 11-1 this season, and they're competing this weekend for a college football playoff spot if they beat Tulane. He handpicked and developed a QB in Drew Mestemaker, who is completing 71% of his passes and has thrown for just under 4,000 yards, 29 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions as a redshirt freshman. It also would not surprise me in the slightest if Mestemaker followed Morris to Oklahoma State. I think that's something to keep an eye on. You mentioned that North Texas was the highest scoring team in the country this year at 46.8 points per game. They also just flat out had the best offense, period, with 511 yards of offense per game. Just ridiculous. Oklahoma State was the worst Power 4 team in the country this year, going 1-11. It would not shock me if Eric Morris comes in and immediately Oklahoma State becomes like a 7-win team in the Big 12 next year. So I'm giving this an A+, phenomenal hire for Oklahoma State. Up next, we have Bob Chesney, who went from James Madison to UCLA. Again, contract details are not fully out there at the moment. So, Braden, what do you give this one?
I think this is my second favorite hire of the coaching cycle behind James Franklin going to Virginia Tech. Bob Chesney as a college head coach is 131-51. At the FBS level, James Madison, he is 20-5. And according to Pete Thamel, I'm quoting this from his article about Chesney signing with UCLA. He has also developed a reputation as a turnaround artist, and he has resuscitated struggling programs at Division III Sal Regina, Division II Assumption University, and turned FCS Holy Cross into a high-level winner. Granted, some of my concerns about Sumrall, Jon Sumrall, also apply to Bob Chesney. He was set up in a great position by Curt Cignetti's success early on in James Madison's FBS tenure, but at the same time did lose a lot to the portal. However, UCLA is undoubtedly a lower stakes job than Florida in 2025. UCLA can afford to be patient with Bob Chesney's process of rebuilding the program in a way that Florida really can't with Jon Sumrall. As a Gator fan, I can say that a lot of our fan base is extremely angry. UCLA's fan base will be very patient, I think, compared to ours. So this is an extremely low risk, major reward hire for UCLA. I'm going to give it an A.
Yeah, I'm going to go somewhere in the B to B plus range for Bob Chesney. He had the tough task of replacing Curt Cignetti at James Madison, and in his 2 years there, they're 20-5. And with some help from Duke this weekend, they could make the college football playoff as the 12 seed. They had a top 5 defense nationally in yards per game allowed this year. I do think Curt Cignetti should get some of the credit for developing their quarterback Alonzo Barnett, but I think Chesney deserves more of it. He's thrown for 46 touchdowns to just 11 picks in the last 2 years. His predecessor turned Indiana around in 2 years. I don't expect that from Bob Chesney, but I do think you can expect more than 8 wins in 2 years, like we've seen the past couple of years with UCLA and Deshaun Foster. So I like this one a lot. I would say probably a B plus, kind of same thing. If I'm grading, on a test 1 to 100, probably 86, 87. So right at that turn, but yeah, I think this is a good hire for UCLA. Sticking in the Big Ten, Pat Fitzgerald to Michigan State, former Northwestern head coach. Don't know the details of his contract, but it is a 5-year deal. Don't know how much money. But Braden, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, Pat Fitzgerald has had a ton of success at Northwestern, at least by their standards. He's probably the best coach in their program's history. In his 17 seasons there, he was 110 and 101. He finished the season ranked 5 times, had 3 10-win seasons, had 2 more 9-win seasons, and made 2 appearances in the Big Ten championship game. Similar to Lane Kiffin, albeit in a different way, Pat Fitzgerald also comes with some baggage. He was fired in July of 2023 after a pretty bad hazing scandal that, at the very least, borders on sexual harassment, if not more. And then that went public and he was fired. He did settle his wrongful termination lawsuit with Northwestern, so it's publicly at least unclear if he knew about the stuff going on in the locker room. Additionally, as far as on field results go, every time Northwestern had a great year under Pat Fitzgerald, they almost certainly were going to follow it up with a dud. In 2012, they went 10-3. The year after, they went 5-7. In 2015, they went 10-3, followed by 7-6 next year. Then they went 19-8 overall between 2017 and 2018. 2019, they were 3-9. 2020, they bounced back, go to the Big Ten championship at 7-2, followed it up with 3-9, and then 1-11 seasons. Northwestern's obviously a difficult job, but with such sporadic success, it's fair to wonder how much of a role luck was involved in that tenure there. And additionally, Pat Fitzgerald was in the Big Ten West, which basically only had two schools that had competent football going on at the time during that entire decade. So on the field, I'm not sure he can even make the Spartans a contender. Not necessarily even a contender for a Big Ten title, but ideally you want to be in the picture for the college football playoff if you're Michigan State. I don't know if Fitzgerald does that. I think he's a floor raiser. I don't see him being enough of a ceiling raiser to make him a long-term solution. So I'm going to give this a C minus. This feels like a safe hire, at least from the on-field perspective, to make the job more attractive for the next guy in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I would give it something in that same range, probably like a C, C plus. I do think Jonathan Smith should have gotten more than 2 years at Michigan State. I don't hate the hire for the Spartans, but I don't love it at the same time. Um, you did mention Pat Fitzgerald had some success. He had Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game, which in today's world where there's no more divisions in the Big Ten would never have happened. But still impressive. I can't comment on that off the field stuff you mentioned, but on the field, he's proven that he can win in the Big Ten. It was a rough couple of years at Northwestern right before he got fired, but he did have multiple 10-win seasons in the 2010s. It's also Northwestern. It's not like they were ever true national title or really ever Big Ten contenders. So I think this is a fine hire for now. But this is definitely one of those coaches where I could see him being canned in 3 years. So I think somewhere in that C, C plus, C minus range, where we both got him, is accurate. So I like that. Moving back to the SEC, Will Stein, the former / current offensive coordinator for the Oregon Ducks, hired by the Kentucky Wildcats. Don't know the details of it, but Braden, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, Will Stein's a former college quarterback, didn't really play a ton at Louisville. I think he threw like 200 passes over his career there. But despite not seeing much game action, understanding the quarterback position inside and out is going to be huge for Kentucky, especially with a young quarterback in Cutter Boley, who looked pretty good towards the end of this year. With the Oregon Ducks, they've had a top 20 scoring offense in each of Stein's 3 seasons as the offensive coordinator and the quarterback's coach. Stein also turned just 36 years old a couple of months ago, so he's very young. I think that'll be a plus for Kentucky. On the downsides, he has zero experience as a head coach, only 4 years as an offensive coordinator. That doesn't always translate. I'm going to give this one a B. I'm actually going to bump it up to a B plus. I like that Kentucky went bold with this hire. Mark Stoops was a solid coach, but almost every season at Kentucky felt the exact same. Maybe Stein will flop, but he is a much better option than getting a retread. And at the very least, you're trying something new instead of just running on the same hamster wheel you've been in for 15 years.
Yeah, I'm gonna go B plus here. Kentucky spent 37 million buying out Mark Stoops. Makes a lot more sense why now with Will Stein. He was the OC and quarterback coach at Oregon for the last 3 years. He developed Bo Nix, developed Dylan Gabriel into NFL quarterbacks, has turned Dante Moore into an NFL prospect. It seems like everybody from the Oregon offense that gets drafted turns into an important piece of the offense they're in. I mean, even just looking at their day 3 picks over the last couple of years, Bucky Irving, Troy Franklin, who's had an increased role with Denver in his second year. Tez Johnson is having an impact with the Bucks as a rookie, 7th-round pick. And like I said, all those guys were day 3 draft picks, but were NFL ready because of the offense they played in at Oregon. Kentucky's top recruit currently is the number 13 quarterback prospect in the country, in Matt Ponitowski. He has said he won't be signing in the early signing period this week, but he took a visit to Oregon, an official visit to Oregon back in June. So he's very familiar with Oregon. Will Stein's very familiar with him. Um, so whether he signs or not, I think Will Stein is a great get for Kentucky. And I think he's going to get them not necessarily towards the top of the SEC, but I think this is a Kentucky team going forward that could be, a solid 8-9 win team, like they had been for a few years in the late 2010s, early 2020s. So I like the hire for Kentucky a lot. Tavita Pritchard to the Stanford Cardinal. He was the Washington Commanders quarterback coach, was also a former Stanford quarterback himself. Does not have any head coaching experience, but Braden, what do you make of this hire for Stanford?
Yeah, I think his ties to the program are really big. He's a Stanford legend. He led that 41-point underdog win at USC. He's got some good ties to the university, so I think it'll be good for the alumni to hopefully invest more in the program. And I think his ties with Andrew Luck, who is Stanford's GM, are going to be big as well. They were in the same quarterback room for a couple of years there. And most current players and recruits grew up watching Andrew Luck play with the Colts. The connection between a GM and head coach is vital in today's game. These guys should see eye to eye pretty much the entire way. So that's a plus. And additionally, he's been maybe tabbed as a quarterback whisperer. I don't know if there's enough evidence to really say that yet, but he did some pretty good work with Jaden Daniels last year. So at the very least, there's something there. But overall, Stanford football is suddenly one of the hardest jobs in the Power Four. A guy with zero experience as a head coach or even as a play caller, because David Shaw called plays while Tavita Pritchard was the offensive coordinator for Stanford. It's going to be tough to convince kids to play at Stanford when they have a lackluster NIL program compared to a lot of schools, and half of your conference games are completely on the opposite side of the country. They don't have nearly enough of a draw. I mean, it's basically just the educational aspect, and at that point, you're not going to be getting a lot of these elite recruits. So I think it's going to be tough. I think Pritchard could get something done. Maybe at the very least he lays some groundwork. But I'm going to give this hire a C plus. It's low risk. Maybe you have some type of payoff, but I don't love it.
Yeah, and I was going to give it a C. I'm kind of in that same boat as you. I mentioned the no head coaching experience. That certainly is reason for concern if you're a Stanford fan. I do love coaches that have NFL experience, though, so that's a plus. He's been around the college game for a while. He was an assistant at Stanford for several years. Was the OC at Stanford for like 5 years, I think, from 2017 to 2022. I'm just worried about a first-time head coach taking over for a bad Power Four team. They were 4-8 this year, and I don't see them making a dramatic jump over the next couple of years with Pritchard. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a C. I don't see this being a huge needle mover. Um, yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add on that front. Pete Golding, kind of the last true hire that we have, if you can even call it that. Um, it wasn't even really a hire; it was kind of just a next man up thing. He was the defensive coordinator at Ole Miss, and with them not being able to execute a full on coaching search with where they're currently at, they are naming Golding their quote permanent head coach. So they did not have much of a choice. But Braden, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I think it's good for this season. It's continuity in a time where they really need it. It gives the players and coaching staff that sticks around something to rally around after Lane Kiffin leaves. I saw the leaked video of the players meeting, and the locker room or whatever room they were in, I guess, erupted when he was announced as the permanent coach. He was the Alabama defensive coordinator for 5 years, part of the national championship team in 2020. So he's got some experience over there as well. And the Ole Miss defense has been great over the last 2 years. They were second in points per game allowed last year. They're 26th this year. But at the same time, without having a full blown coaching search, this feels a little bit like a panic hire. I'd have to see, the length of the contract to decide that exactly. But despite his success as a head coach, or sorry, a defensive coordinator, Golding has never been linked to any head coach openings. I think this gives the players and the fan base some peace of mind, but I have to give this one a B minus. It may have been better to just name Pete Golding the interim coach until they got to look at what he could do in the college football playoff. But at the same time, maybe he is an unofficial interim coach, and maybe the buyout or whatever, if he gets a different contract, isn't going to be enough where it's a staggering amount if you have to let him go after 1 year.
Yeah, I think B minus is a good grade. That's what I'm going to go with as well. Um, like I said, they didn't really have much of a choice here. They didn't have time for a full coaching search. Pete Golding was the the defensive coordinator at Alabama for multiple years before leaving for the same job at Ole Miss. So I'm well familiar with Pete Golding. He's been better at Ole Miss than he was at Alabama, but he's not going to be a good long-term head coach. He's never been a head coach, and now he's being thrown into the middle of an 11-1 season for Ole Miss, who's going to make the playoff. I think Ole Miss was plain and simple, just kind of fucked. I mean, this is the best decision that they can make right now. He'll probably be the head coach for next year at this rate, with not being able to have a search, unless they go out and feel great about somebody who's currently not with another program. But I'd expect them to try to find somebody else ahead of the 2027 season. But for now, it could be worse for Ole Miss. Just an unfortunate set of circumstances with where they're at. And then before we wrap up the coaching carousel, we got to talk about Penn State briefly. They still don't have a head coach for a team who has been eliminated from any sort of postseason. I guess they're made a bowl game, but from any sort of real meaningful postseason games for a month and a half. You would think that at this point they would have a guy in mind, and they did. I mean, I think Kalani Sitake of BYU was their guy. It was announced earlier today that he is staying put at BYU. So with that, Braden, who should Penn State target going forward, and what do you make of this whole situation?
Honestly, I don't even know who they should target at this point. I feel like every coach has been basically wiped up at this point. You probably got to look at some offensive coordinators or defensive coordinators at Power 4 schools currently. I don't have any off the top of my head that I think would be a phenomenal fit for Penn State. But I think this really sets them up in a terrible spot for 2026. You go into National Signing Day as a Power 4 program, one with national championship expectations, and you don't have a head coach. Why are guys going to commit there? Additionally, you're going to probably be going into portal season without a head coach as well. That puts you at a disadvantage. Guys are going to leave through the portal. Fewer guys are probably going to come in. Maybe you have a good spring portal window, but I don't know. I think Penn State is in a really rough spot for 2026. I think after that, if they get this hire right, they'll be fine, but it's going to be tough for next year for sure.
Yeah, they're in a horrendous position right now. Their current recruiting class for 2026 is ranked 121st in the country, and they don't have a head coach. So they better pray that they get like all of the top portal guys, because this team is going to be in a bad spot next year with where things currently stand. As far as some guys to target, I mean, I think Matt Campbell at Iowa State has to be the number one. But if he hasn't left already, I don't think he's going to. A couple of coordinators also stood out to me. Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator at LSU. I've heard a lot of head coaching buzz around him. Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator at Alabama. I've heard some as well, but that was mainly within SEC territory. So I don't really know. I don't know where Penn State goes from here. I think they would have preferred to have a head coach on Sunday, but they still don't. And I'm sure they're bummed that Tataki is not going anywhere, because that would have been a great hire. But yeah, they've got some things to figure out there in Pennsylvania, and I'm glad I'm not a part of it, because what a shitstorm right now for the Nittany Lions.